You are listening to the We Need to Talk About Oscar podcast, and this is our interview with the production designer of Daddio, Kristi Zea.
Sometimes I'll wake up in the morning and I'll say, I know what we need for this particular scene or this particular moment. It's having confidence in your own ability to solve problems or to arrive at something that gives enough of an impression of how to visually tell the story. That's the point.
We have this little tradition on the show where we start by asking our guests to turn back the wheel of time and tell us about how they fell in love with films in the first place. So, Kristi, what's your story?
Oh, my goodness. Well, let's see. I started in this crazy business quite some time ago, and I began as a stylist for commercial photographers and television commercials. So I was running around the city getting the perfect tie or booking talent for commercials. I segued from that into, I guess the first thing I did was a costume design film for an afternoon children's special back in the day. But my first big break came when I designed costumes for Fame, Alan Parker's film. And that was a joy because I had gone to the High School of Music and Art in New York City, which is still in existence. And Fame was based on both the High School of Music and Art and also the High School of Performing Arts. And Alan Parker hired me to do that film because I had gone to those two schools. And he had also been a commercial director first and foremost, after which he became a very well-known film director. So I did that film with him, and that sort of launched my career. And I began as a costume designer for films, and I did a lot of really wonderful ones like Terms of Endearment and Silverado and films like that. And then at a certain point, I thought, gosh, it would be fun to do the design for the whole film as opposed to just the costumes. Even though I enjoyed doing the costumes, I liked the idea of being able to have more of a design decision-making role as a production designer. So I did a little film called Lucas, and that was after I had worked with James L. Brooks, and his friend who directed Lucas, David Seltzer, asked me if I would want to do the production design on his film, Lucas. And I said, yes. So I did that. And then that started a whole other series of films that I did after that. And I've been a very lucky person because I've worked with some of the best directors in the business: Martin Scorsese, Jonathan Demme, Barry Levinson, James L. Brooks. And so that's sort of my trajectory. Yeah. And so my last little film was Daddio, which just came out. And that was a real fun film to work on because it was very different than anything I'd ever done before.
And right before steering our conversation towards Daddio, with such an experience and having worked on films directed by absolute legends, like you just mentioned, Martin Scorsese, Jonathan Demme, Nancy Meyers, Sam Mendes, and the list could go just on and on. What is it that you are looking for in a director and in your collaboration with them?
It's a good question because I honestly like working with directors who are collaborative. There's a kind of joy that I get out of working with people who have very strong visions for what they want, but I also have fun working with directors who have no idea what they want. And I sort of revel in both kinds of situations. For example, someone like Scorsese has very, very specific ideas of how he's going to shoot something. He annotates his scripts because he used to be an editor before he started doing films himself. And so he knows exactly how he's going to put a film together. He knows all what the transition shots are going to be. He knows the color bridge. He knows if it's going to be two shots or, high angles. I mean, he gets very, very specific. And so working with him, the first film I did with him was New York Stories, which was a small film that was part of a series of films. They were shorts. It was a fascinating film to work on, actually, because the paintings became a character in the film. And at first he said, I'm never going to see the paintings. I'm never going to see them. I said, well, okay. And so we started to look for locations and we were getting all excited about it. And then he went off to Venice for the film festival. And I got a phone call from him and he said, guess what? I said, what? He said, we're going to see the paintings. We have to see the paintings. So we wound up having to cast a painter who had to be acknowledged as being a major painter. But if he was too famous a painter, then this might have been a story about this guy's life. So it was a nice kind of challenge to find out who was going to be the guy who represented the character in the film's paintings. And all of these things are great challenges. And so, working on a film like Silence of the Lambs, originally I didn't want to do the film. I had done Married to the Mob with Jonathan, which I loved to pieces. I thought it was, he's just a great director. And he, contrary to Scorsese, he's open to anything. In fact, his whole methodology is, tell me what you think is the right look or feeling for this film. And he, of course, reserves the right to say, gosh, I disagree with you. I want this, 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 and this. But that's not really his style. What he likes to do is ask the people who he's working with to really contribute in a way that will make it possible for him to sort of rise above the whole process and make it a community effort, which isn't to say that Scorsese doesn't do that too, but it's just a different kind of working environment. So in the case of Silence of the Lambs, I read the script and I was kind of terrified by it to begin with, because I was thinking, okay, I'm going to have to get into the mindset of these people, these serial killers, because in order to really do a really good job in the design sense is that you really have to think the way they do. And I thought, I don't know if I can handle that. And I actually said to Jonathan, I don't think I can do this. And he said, why? And I said, well, because, it's terrible. What if somebody copycats this whole thing? And he said, no, you don't understand. This is a feminist piece. And it's a story of Jodie Foster's character and how she surmounts these unbelievable problems and difficulties in a man's world and actually finds this guy. So I said, oh, okay. And I got on board. And of course, immediately I was having claustrophobic attacks when we went down to the FBI and went down into the basement, down into what had been the bomb shelters for the Quantico at FBI. And so there are no windows. And I was looking at walls filled with serial killers, victims. And I actually had to leave. I had to go up in the air and get out of the room. But from that period to the time when we started shooting, I was getting into deep conversations with special effects and makeup artists about whether or not the skin was going to hold up on a hanger properly, So, and I was getting mail sent to my hotel room with hearts inside, human hearts size. They weren't real, of course, but they looked real. And I put them on my dresser and the maid wouldn't come in and do my room, because she was so freaked out. But your head gets into these things and you wind up really living deeply into the project that you're working on. And that's been my experience throughout. Sam Mendes, Barry Levinson, all those people, they all want the same thing, basically. They want you to get totally involved in what the film is all about. And then you hire, it's not just me, it's hiring a team of really, really important contributing crew like set decorators and prop people and painters and construction, and all of those people have to be at the top of their game too. So, and then it's a joy to work with, people who are as excited about it as you are. So that's sort of been my experience.
And now finally onto the film at hand, Daddio. Even though your goal is, I would guess, or I would think, is to make the fact that this film is shot on a soundstage feel seamless. And looking at behind the scenes speaks, it's quite an obvious difference just from a bigger picture point of view. However, what I want to ask you is what distinction the general audience wouldn't be able to point out between shooting on location or even just a huge build set versus on a stage like this in such confined spaces.
Hmm. Well, that's what I found so fascinating about the idea of doing the film. Well, first of all, I think the first thing that happened was that one of Martin Scorsese's producers, Emma Tillinger-Kossoff, sent me the script. And when I read the script, I was very, very affected by it. I thought it was really beautifully written. And I was fascinated by it. You know, this is sort of like My Dinner with Andre meets Taxi Driver. And yes, there were big challenges in how to do it because honestly, practically speaking, it would have been a disaster to try and shoot this for real. And the actual job of a production designer isn't just to create these worlds, but also to be practical about it and to think very carefully about the best way to do the work and make it seamless, as you say. And when I jumped on board, then they said to me, "Oh my God, if you're going to do it, then we're going to raise the bar on who we hire to do the cinematography." And one of the executive producers knew Faden Papamichael. And Faden is a genius. Let's just say that. He is a genius. And he's also a wonderful person to work with because sometimes production design and cinematography can have conflicts and difficult times. And that's not the case with Faden. He's a beautiful man. And so we had decided, even before Faden came on board, I think, that we were not going to be able to shoot this in real time because the practicality of being able to cover the characters inside the taxi and make sure that all the cars around you were the same and the lighting. And, you know, I mean, the first thing that we did, I think it was possibly my suggestion, was that we should shoot it at night because that we could get away with a lot that way. Well, first of all, it would add to the mood of the piece and the kind of encapsulation that would exist inside the taxi as a result of being sort of in this cocoon. And it made it possible for us to cheat all over the place in terms of, you know, it's very hard to shoot at JFK, very hard. Post-COVID, post 9/11, very hard. So we found a piece of another airport out in Long Island at the MacArthur Airport that looked enough like JFK. And again, because we were at night, we could sort of isolate one of those areas at MacArthur Airport that really reminded me of certain parts of JFK. So we set that up as the place where Gurley gets into the taxi and drives away. Cut to, and this is where the magic really came in. An array car is a car that has about 9 cameras on it. You know, front, back, sides, rear, high, low. Anyway, 9 cameras. And so we had the array car. This is all in pre-production, of course. Do the trip basically from JFK onto the Long Island Expressway, up over the hill, and then you see all of New York glistening in the foreground, down into the tunnel, which is almost like a birth canal in a way, and it's parallel to what's going on in the storytelling, and then out onto the street and into New York City and across town, and then going up 10th Avenue and around and down into Chelsea, which is where we wound up at the end of our story. And so they did that a couple of times at night, this car, and then all of that information was put into a computer. And then, so when we shot all of the interiors on stage, Diana Burton, who is our amazing prop person, found 3 cabs that were identical, one of which was cut in half. And we put that on the stage. And then we had these, it's called a volume stage these days, I think is the name of it. But it's these huge, gigantic LED screens that are front, back, side, top. You know, they're all different sizes and shapes. And all that information that the array car got is put onto those LED screens. And then we had to break up the script into segments so that when we were outside, we would see certain things at the same time all the time against the dialogue. So this was a very, very complicated, and it was all in Faden's hands to be able to do the lighting in such a way as that there were times when we would see real things, like when she looks out and sees the little girl, or when they see the accident. We staged the accident outside on a piece of the New Jersey Turnpike, even though it was supposed to be the Long Island Expressway, so that when they came by and they could see this accident and then they'd keep going. So all of that information was put into the computer. It was put into Faden's head. It was put into my head just because we had created this monster to start with. And then all the wonderful bits and pieces inside the taxi, all these personal elements like the money tree and all of that. We talked about that with Sean and make sure that, all of those elements were there to his liking. And I thought that it was wonderful when he waters the little tree. But, there's just a wonderful mood. He's got pictures that tell a story about him, and she's got her fancy phone and her fabulous nails and all the other things that we had to set up. But we shot for 16 days, and there were only 2 days of exteriors. And then at the end, when he drops her off in Chelsea, I said, to be honest, we can find something that looks just like this in Hoboken, New Jersey, because that's where we were based. And so we were going to get the New Jersey tax credit. So it meant that we shouldn't be shooting anything other than what we had to. But we did that in pre-production, and it was only an array car, so there was nobody in it. So we set up this whole end scenes, and we shot those in Hoboken. Even though you see him turning the corner onto 45th Street or whatever street we decided on, and that was all done, again, with the array car. So it is magic.
Yeah, it really is. And in a featurette or interview, one of the two, Christy Hall, the director, mentions that you came up with the idea of the plant, the tree that you previously just mentioned, Clark has in the car. And of course, helping the characters and the actors inhabit the set is a crucial aspect of your job. But when the space you have to fill is once again so little, or rather tight, you can't really overdo it or fill it too much. When you designed and assembled the interior of the car, were there many talks about what should or shouldn't be there, whether this or that is too much, but at the same time we are missing something else?
Yes, those are all good questions. And it's a funny thing. You never know when something is going to be important or not. I can remember elements of, for example, in Silence of the Lambs, or even, in Goodfellas, where something very small could be so revealing. In Goodfellas, which is such a beautifully rendered story, one of the things that I always remember most is when there's a close-up of someone slicing garlic with a straight-edge razor blade in the jail. Things like that, where you just don't know when something is going to be an important moment, or you're going to see, like, at the end scene in Silence of the Lamb, there's this whirligig that spins around. You just don't know when little elements are going to suddenly become extremely important. And we had done some research of taxis all over the world. And I think we had gotten to one that was either in Hong Kong or Singapore, and there was a money tree in it. A little money tree was in this cab. And he had a Buddha and he had a bunch of other things. But I said, that money tree, there's something about that money tree. And we had some books we had different kinds of books that he had. And some of these things never see the light of day on the film, but they also help the character, helps the actor. The thing that I really love doing is, for example, in Revolutionary Road, inside the bedroom, Kate Winslet can open up a drawer and there's stuff inside. She's in the kitchen. It's fully dressed. There are silverware, everything. Because even though you may never see it, you might see it. And if you do, then it just gives you even that much more of a real feel. But it certainly helps the actors as well. And so all of the pieces that were in his cab, we definitely talked to Sean about. Because again, it's helping him get to where he needs to be in terms of his character. So he had pictures of his dad and him fishing. It wasn't actually his dad. It was my art department coordinator's father and son were up, in the what is it, the windshield. But those are things that the camera just goes to for a minute. And it just gives us another layer of character about Clark's character. And the ability to cut away to those things also helps get you out of the kind of claustrophobic feeling that you are inside this cab. And it just feeds you another little piece of information about who Clark is. And I think it's down to the kind of suitcase that Girlie had. It's down to the kind of shoes that she's wearing. It's what she looks like. And, all of these things, because it's so microcosm, you feed on all that information and it comes out as part of how you are understanding these two characters and how they're going to interact with each other.
As my last question to you, I would like to return to the topic of experience. What's crazy to me, even just thinking about it, is how two-sided this whole thing is, with the fact that your choices later on affect your craft thanks to their nature, plus the style and approach of the aforementioned directors. But at the same time, your very own craft and style have an impact on the choices you make. How do you see these factors shaping one's career? And of course, specifically, how have they shaped yours?
Well, I believe in instinct on so many levels. And where my designs come from, my ideas come from, sometimes they come to me in the middle of the night. Sometimes I'll wake up in the morning and I'll say, I know what we need for this particular scene or this particular moment. It's having confidence in your own ability to solve problems or to arrive at something that gives enough of an impression of how to visually tell the story. That's the point. The point is how to visually tell the story. It's not always going to be something where someone says something. It's going to be something that somebody sees. And that's how I like to work. I like to work, with people.
Christy, once again, thanks so much for taking the time. I absolutely love talking to you. So thanks so much.
Thank you. You asked really great questions.